Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be going over 10 players that I believe you should have in all your starting lineups going forward into the fantasy playoffs, because these guys are about to absolutely explode. But before we get into these guys, I want to encourage you to hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video at the end if you did enjoy. We're gonna be starting it off today with a guy that is just coming back from injury. He's been out basically the whole season. You probably drafted him pretty early on too, so it's been pretty disappointing up to this point, but I think he's about to turn on the Jets and really win you some fantasy matchups. It's Keenan Allen. All right, he came back, looked great against the Kansas City Chiefs. He was on a limited snap count, still managed to pull in 5 receptions, 94 yards on 8 targets, 12.4 PPR fantasy points. You'll take that every day of the week. He's going up against a couple defenses in a row here, 3 actually. We got the Cardinals, Las Vegas Raiders, and then the Miami Dolphins all in a row. These should be games where they're shootout type games where Keenan Allen's getting involved heavily. Towards the end of the year, don't really love the matchup starting off the playoffs with Tennessee and then Indianapolis, but that doesn't matter. I think he's going to win you some matchups, getting you up to that point. I wouldn't be worried about this guy. I mean, especially if Mike Williams is going to be out. Sorry to all the Mike Williams owners out there. It looks like he re-aggravated that ankle sprain that was bothering him and that he was out for 4 weeks with. So that's definitely not good news for Mike Will owners, but Keenan Allen, you got to feel good about this guy going forward. All right, next up on this list is a guy that I've been telling you to buy in on. Everybody's hating on this guy every single week. It's bound to happen eventually. Najee Harris breaks out with his 27.6 fantasy point performance in PPR leagues. Let's go, Najee. We knew it was coming eventually, but I mean, Jaylen Warren had a hamstring injury in this game, kept him out for the majority of the contest. I think going forward, you know, maybe that does linger a bit, and Najee is that workhorse back that you knew he would be. He has some favorable matchups going into the end of the year here after next week against Indy, which I think he might struggle a little bit in. He's got Atlanta, Baltimore, Carolina, Las Vegas, and then Baltimore again. I'm feeling good about Najee. I'm telling you guys, I told you to buy in on him. I think he's going to do great the rest of the season. I don't know. The hate was just a little too much on this guy. You drafted him probably first round, like late first round. And for him to just be dropping constant like 10-point performances in PPR leagues to now going to 27.6, I'm telling you, if you held him the whole year, which I know very few people did, you're feeling good about the rest of the year. I like what I saw this week against Cincinnati from Najee Harris. Next up is another guy that I'm probably way too invested in. I'm very high on this guy, Stevenson, looking like an incredible player out there. Absolutely dominating the pass catching out of the backfield. 6 catches for 56 yards this past week in PPR leagues. That's going to get you 11.6 just based on the catches and yards alone. He did not do very good on the ground, I will say, against New York Jets. 15 carries for 26 yards, but I feel like the Jets defense is the hardest they're going to face the rest of the year. They got Minnesota, Buffalo, whose defense kind of struggles on the ground, I'm not going to lie, Arizona, Las Vegas, Cincinnati, and then Miami. These are all games where Stevenson, if he doesn't rush for 100 yards, he's catching passes for 50, 60, 70 yards in these games and getting you points. He's getting you those wins that you desperately need. In standard leagues, you're a little less, excited about this, but in PPR leagues, Stevenson, you're loving what you're seeing out of this guy, and I'm not gonna, decrease his value going forward because I think he's worth a lot. If you're looking to even, I know a lot of trade deadlines are already up, but if yours expires next week, one of my leagues expires next week, I wouldn't even think about trading this guy unless you're getting some real good value back, because he's looking like a league winner. You drafted him pretty late for the value he's providing you, so I like what we're seeing out of him. Next up on the list, we got AMON-RA St. Brown, and everybody was so quick to call this guy out as well. Just like Najee Harris, everybody's jumping on this guy saying, you know what, he's not the same as he was in the beginning of the season, blah, blah, blah. He dropped a 20.4 point performance beginning of the season against Philly, then followed it up with almost a 40-point PPR performance. How can this guy not be the same player he was at the beginning of the year just because he got injured for a couple games? Guys, he's back. AMON-RA is back. 22.1 fantasy points last week, 15 this week, going up against some teams where he will score points. Buffalo, Jacksonville, Minnesota. He's got a stingy Jets defense, Carolina, and then Chicago to end out the year. I will take my chances on AMON-RA. I think if you're in a league where, like I said, your trade deadline hasn't hit yet, I think it's already past the point of trading for this guy. They're going to want insane value for AMON-RA, and I don't blame him. I would have got him a couple of weeks ago, been storing him up this whole time because he is proving everybody right that believes in him. All right, only 8 targets this week against the Giants. They were winning this game for like the entire time. So this is probably bare minimum targets that AMON-RA is going to get for the rest of the year. You know, maybe he falls down 7-ish range is like your floor for AMON-RA's targets, but geez, the sky's the limit for this guy. He could drop a 40 bomb for your team. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm liking what I'm seeing out of him. Next up on this list, we have David Montgomery. I think he is going to continue, at least for these next 2 weeks, to be a crucial part in this Bears offense. All right. Obviously, Khalil Herbert is on the IR, if you did not already know that. Justin Fields is the main running back. He's hurt right now, which could affect David Montgomery, I will say. If Justin Fields misses time, this offense will be completely awful. God awful. Going against the Jets and the Green Bay Packers the next 2 weeks, you better hope Justin Fields gets on the field and plays. Then David Montgomery's value will be way up there. Like, he is a solid starting option these next couple weeks until Khalil Herbert returns from that injury. I have no problem at all starting David Montgomery. Even going into the fantasy playoffs, we saw that Philly's run defense is not as good as everybody thought it was. Also, the Buffalo Bills run defense, they give up a lot of running yards. They give up a lot of rushing yards and a lot of pass catching for running backs, so you're not too worried about that. And then they end off the year in Detroit. Pretty favorable schedule for David Montgomery. You just got to hope Justin Fields can get his butt back on the field with I think it was a left shoulder injury. So he should be fine to go. We'll see what happens with him, but if he's on the field, I like David Montgomery the rest of the way. Next up on this list is a player that I own in a couple leagues. Hasn't really turned the Jets on too much. It's going to be Mike Evans. Coming off the bye week, I think Brady and Evans get on the same page. He's got to turn it on eventually. He gets the target share that you want to see out of a #1 wide receiver. The points just aren't there. He hasn't scored since week 4 of the season so far. They're going up against a Cleveland team that is not great, New Orleans, San Fran, Cincinnati, Arizona, Carolina. And the big thing that I'm looking at in all of these games is if the Buccaneers will be up big in these matchups. And I don't think they will. I don't think they're going to be up in any of these matchups, if I'm being totally honest with you, by more than a touchdown. So that means they're going to have to keep passing the ball throughout the game. More opportunity for Mike Evans, more opportunity for Chris Godwin. And I'm hoping we picked up Rachaad White on the waiver wire video, didn't we? So hopefully this whole team turns on in the second half of the year and they try to make that playoff run because, you know, it's all in for Tom Brady. We need to make the playoffs. We're Tom Brady. We don't make the playoffs, then we're not Tom Brady. So I think you can be confident in Evans, confident in Godwin, confident in Rachaad White for the rest of the year here. Next up on this list is Amari Cooper, who dropped a fat 31.3 PPR point fantasy game. This guy going into the rest of the year, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Deshaun Watson will be back week 14, I believe, against the Cincinnati Bengals. How can this offense not get better? This offense is already looking great with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Their running game's working. Their passing game's working. Tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like a great situation going into your fantasy playoffs, having Amari Cooper on your team, having Donovan Peoples-Jones on your team. I don't mind having either of these guys starting heading into my fantasy playoffs. All right, next up is a guy that I mentioned in my last video. I was telling people to dish him off a little too early. George Pickens. I'm going to switch my mind on him. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to take the L. George Pickens should explode going into your fantasy playoffs because Kenny Pickett only looks at George Pickens. I'm telling you right now, it's George Pickens. And then it's Pat Freiermuth in this offense. Deontay Johnson, for whatever reason, he's open. They don't look at him. Whatever the case may be, doesn't matter what I think. George Pickens is getting the looks. He should have actually had another touchdown against Cincinnati, which would have had his value boosted way up. He would have had like 26, 27, 28 fantasy points in PPR leagues if he caught a long touchdown. Fell right through his fingertips, which is totally unfortunate. That happens all the time and it sucks. But these past 2 weeks, 14.5, 18.3 fantasy points for George Pickens in PPR leagues. I'd like to see a little more targets. That's what I was concerned about in the weeks prior. I was saying, you know, 4 targets, 6 targets the last 2 weeks. That's not great. If this is going to be a guy that I start on a weekly basis, I want to see about 10 targets for George Pickens. Hopefully you get that consistency going into the rest of the year, and I think you might, just based on what I've seen out of these Pittsburgh Steelers games. And it would also benefit you if they are trailing in these games, but the schedule looks, you know, it's not the toughest schedule going into the playoffs, so we'll see what happens with George Pickens. Next up on this list is DeVonta Smith, and we noticed a clear trend a couple weeks ago about DeVonta Smith in a video. I told you he only plays well when Jalen Hurts has to throw the ball a lot. So this is going to be against teams that they're not going to absolutely obliterate. They're not going to blow them out of the water like these past couple of weeks against Washington and Indianapolis, who have good defenses. DeVonta Smith steps up. He's actually been playing better than AJ Brown, which is not surprising to me because, you know, the best defenders are going to be on the best player, which is AJ Brown in this offense right now. DeVonta Smith, the consistency is there the last 2 weeks. 8 targets, 9 targets past 2 weeks, 13.9 PPR fantasy points, and then 13.8 respectively. The rest of the season, you're looking at games where they could be close. Yeah, Green Bay could be close game. Tennessee, close game. Giants, close game. Chicago, maybe not feeling great about that, but it could be high scoring, so I'm going to put them on there. Then you got Dallas, New Orleans. Every single game for the rest of the year, I can see it being close. I can see DeVonta Smith averaging in these games 14 fantasy points, 13, 14 fantasy points like he has been putting up. Wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm not going to lie about DeVonta Smith. Last but not least on this list, Kenneth Walker, K9. I'm feeling great about this guy. Like I said, I've talked about this in a couple videos now. The week against Tampa Bay in Germany really just solidified this guy as a top tier running back rest of the season for me. 10 carries in that game, 17 total yards. The reason that I loved this performance out of him was his receptions out of the backfield, 6 for 55 yards. PPR players will tell you this makes all the difference at the running back position. You need a running back to catch passes out of the backfield. These games coming up, we got the Las Vegas Raiders, LA Rams, Carolina Panthers, all super easy matchups she should dominate in. Then it gets a little tougher against the San Francisco 49ers, Kansas City Chiefs, and then Jets going into the playoffs. Like I said, in these games where they struggle to run, he's going to be catching passes, which is what you love to see. I love Kenneth Walker going into the rest of the year. Let me know if you are high on any of these players going into your fantasy playoffs for the rest of the season. If so, drop a like on this video. Also, hit that subscribe button if you are new to the channel. I appreciate you guys, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.